Most people who've started Invincible Season 4 think they have an idea on how strong Thragg is. They watched him tear through Viltrumites like they were nothing and make Mark and Nolan look like amateurs. Like, they came away with the general impression that he's the strongest thing in the show. Well, I went through everything. The comics, the fight records, the specific moments that define his ceiling, and today we're answering the question of just how strong Thragg actually is. You can't understand how powerful Thragg is without understanding what he was made to be, because the power didn't happen by accident. The Viltrumite Empire's near collapse came from two things happening in close succession. Emperor Argal was assassinated by Thetis, then the Scourge virus, engineered specifically to target Viltrumite DNA, tore through what was left and wiped out more than 99% of the species.
I was the first to turn my back on our people's cruelty, the first to reject Argal and his rule of strength.
A civilization of conquerors that had dominated the known universe for thousands of years was reduced to fewer than 50 surviving members. The Empire needed a leader who could rebuild from nothing, hold what remained together under absolute authority, and project enough strength that nobody inside or outside the species would consider challenging the structure. So they built one. Thragg didn't develop his power the way most Viltrumites develop theirs, through natural aging in combat. He was subjected to a training regime from the moment he could stand that had a single purpose: make him stronger than every other Viltrumite alive. Undeniably, inarguably, visibly stronger. Nobody looks at him and thinks about testing it. Usually when we talk about Viltrumites getting stronger, we're describing a biological process. Survive extreme punishment repeatedly over centuries and the body adapts.
It is your day of adulthood.
If you survive.
I didn't forget, Mother.
That's what gave the species its power base. What Thragg went through was different. He was pushed to his limits on a schedule, forced through near-death scenarios intentionally, and engineered to exceed whatever his genetics would produce on their own. The result was the strongest Viltrumite that deliberate construction could build from a species that was already the most powerful in the known universe. That regime worked perfectly. By the time Thragg was given the title of Grand Regent, he sat clearly above every other surviving member of his species. Strength, speed, durability, combat instinct, all of it developed to a level that made the gap between him and the next most powerful Viltrumite feel like comparing a Viltrumite to a normal human. Conquest was afraid of him. That alive could tell you where Thragg sits. Conquest beat Mark twice and nearly killed him both times. He had centuries of combat experience and enough power to casually demolish city blocks. Looked at Thragg and showed visible fear. When Conquest failed to kill Mark and had to face Thragg afterward, he begged for forgiveness.
Make my death painful so others may learn and grow stronger from it. I beg you, Grand Regent Thragg.
Conquest, who had never begged for anything in his centuries of existence, got on his knees in front of Thragg. That tells you what the hierarchy is, and Conquest was the Viltrumite Thragg sent on suicide missions because he found him useful, not because he saw him as a peer. Understand, a Viltrumite in their prime is already operating at a level that can punch through planets. Nolan Grayson, who is explicitly not among the strongest Viltrumites and is considered average to above average within the species.
You conquered hundreds of planets, brought glory to the Empire. You were one of our greatest warriors.
Literally cracked a planet's surface during his fight with Mark. The collateral damage in Viltrumite combat is geological. The species evolved over thousands of years of internal conflict, each generation stronger than the last because the weak died, until all that was left was a race where the weakest member could still do things that would qualify as civilization-ending events anywhere else. Thragg is the strongest member one. In his first real confrontation with Mark and Nolan together, he handles both of them simultaneously with one arm, not one hand each. He physically grabs both of them at the same time and attempts to smash their heads together. Mark couldn't make him bleed. Nolan's intervention was the only thing that allowed Mark to even escape. Thragg let them go because he needed Viltrumite numbers and they were still useful alive. He chose mercy for his own convenience, not because he had to. Later in the comics, he tore Invincible's body apart and put him in a coma. This is the same Mark who had survived Conquest twice, lived through the Viltrumite War, and had his stats officially measured as 138% stronger than his Season 1 baseline.
Mark's speed has increased 65%, his endurance 70%, and his strength 138%.
Thragg did it like it was an afterthought during a moment of anger, not even maximum effort. The Omni-Man comparisons make the gap clearest. Nolan Grayson at full power, prime Viltrumite with centuries of combat behind him, genuinely cannot close the gap with Thragg. Thragg impales him. Thragg headbutts him hard enough to stagger him, and again, this is someone durable enough to fly through planets. Nolan's best shots give Thragg a nosebleed. That's nothing to him. Whatever you thought of as peak strength in this universe, Thragg sits well above it. It's also worth pointing out that during the Viltrumite Civil War sections of the comics, we see Thragg taking on multiple Viltrumites simultaneously, tanking punches to his head from full-strength Viltrumites without flinching, leaving them with broken arms just from the attempt. Against Thragg, they functioned like a physical inconvenience.
However strong you think you are, Thragg is stronger.
Thragg's speed is the one thing people consistently underestimate, and it's actually the quality that makes him the most difficult opponent to manage. Viltrumites travel between star systems under their own power. They achieve faster than light flight naturally as a species. Thragg is faster than all his peers. There are specific comic moments that back that up clearly. During the Viltrumite War, there's a sequence where Mark is fleeing Thragg in space with stars visibly blurring around them from the speed of their movement. Stars blurring means covering light years in moments, and Thragg caught him. Mark, who is faster than Nolan, couldn't create enough distance. Thragg could. He also dodged Space Racer's Infinity Ray during combat. For context on why that matters, Space Racer's gun is introduced in the comics as essentially the universe's most dangerous weapon. It fires a beam described as capable of destroying anything it touches.
It was said to emit an unstoppable energy wave that destroyed anything in its path.
It's the weapon that the Coalition of Planets treats as a strategic asset in the Viltrumite War, specifically because nothing they know of can withstand a direct hit. Thragg dodged it. The fastest, most dangerous projectile in the known universe, and he just moved out of the way. Why does speed matter for a character who already wins on raw strength? Because at this power level, against opponents who are also physically overwhelming, speed is what determines who lands clean shots and who's constantly reacting. Conquest was a threat to Mark, partly because of his speed creating attack angles Mark couldn't fully track. Thragg is faster than Conquest. He can attack from angles that ground-based fighters can't track, reset whenever he wants, and come back from a completely different direction. The speed makes the strength impossible to avoid. Then there's the sun fight. Near the end of the comics, Mark and Thragg end up fighting inside the sun. The surface burns at roughly 5,000 degrees Celsius. The core is approximately 15 million. Thragg keeps fighting with his throat ripped out, flesh burning off down to muscle and bone. The fight ends when there's nothing left of either of them to continue, and even then the outcome came down to Mark's decision to stay in the core past the point of escape. Thragg's durability didn't fail. His survival instinct kicked in and he tried to leave. Mark stopped him. The Dinosaurus bite is the cleanest single data point. Dinosaurus killed Omnipotus by biting through his skull. Omnipotus was a planet-eating entity that the entire combined force of the Guardians, Tech Jacket, Adam Eve, and multiple heavy hitters couldn't meaningfully damage. Dinosaurus bit through his head and killed him. Then Dinosaurus bit Thragg. His teeth shattered, his claws broke. The thing that killed the unkillable couldn't leave a mark. People focus on the physical numbers because the physical numbers are genuinely hard to process. But the scariest thing about Thragg is that behind all of it is a mind that was trained from birth in every form of combat the Empire had ever recorded.
Our enemies must never know our weakness.
Your words, our deeds.
The Viltrum Empire had conquered thousands of civilizations across thousands of years. Their combat archives contained everything those civilizations knew about fighting. Thragg was specifically built to master all of it as a requirement for the role he was being prepared for. The Battle Beast fight demonstrates this directly. Battle Beast is canonically one of the best pure fighters in the series. His whole identity is finding the strongest available opponent and fighting them to the death for the experience. His skill set reflects a lifetime of doing exactly that. Increasingly dangerous opponents across the universe, never stopping, never losing his drive to find something harder than the last thing.
This party you speak of, will there be opponents worthy of my strength? Viltrumites? How many?
He also came to that fight with full knowledge of Thragg's reputation and specifically sought him out as the greatest available challenge. He knew what he was walking into. That fight lasting days is evidence of how close their technical skill actually was. Even small power differences can end fights fast at this level. Conquest at a fraction of Thragg's power still ended both fights with Mark quickly because the physical gap was enough to overwhelm skill. Thragg vs. Battle Beast ran for days because Battle Beast's technique compensated for the power gap in ways that required Thragg to actually work for the win. He wasn't grinding Battle Beast down, he was figuring out a high-level fighter in real time while taking serious damage from that fighter. That process taking mere days is the clearest signal we get that his combat IQ matches his physical output. He also ran the Viltrum Empire for thousands of years through strategic deception. After the Scourge virus reduced them to fewer than 50 members,
There are fewer than 50 pure-blooded Viltrumites left in the universe. This is the Empire's most closely guarded secret.
he maintained the illusion of a full-strength empire while secretly rebuilding. He sent specific Viltrumites on calculated high-risk missions, spending them deliberately to sustain the fiction that the Empire could still absorb losses. He orchestrated the Tailskria assault with severely limited resources by timing it to when coalition defenses were spread thinnest. He forced Mark and Nolan into a temporary truce by engineering a situation where fighting him cost more than the fight was worth.
I'm sorry, Mark. There's no other way. We need you. The time for war is upon us.
Physical strength got him to Grand Regent. It's his intelligence that kept him there for thousands of years. One thing the show hasn't gotten to yet that the comics are very clear about. Thragg in exile doesn't weaken, he comes back harder. After being removed from power, Thragg retreats to Thraxa, homeworld of a species carrying partial Viltrumite ancestry. He spends years there. He's building a private army from his own genetics, breeding with the Thraxan population, on a scale that the comics depict in a way that tells you how he thinks about other beings. They're a resource, his children with them are weapons. He's working on a generational timescale because that's how he's always operated. But what's also happening is that he's maintaining his conditioning. There's no Viltrum Empire bureaucracy to manage, there's no political situation to navigate.
Will shatter before our strength, our devotion, our vengeance.
There's just Thragg, and whatever Thraxa offers in terms of physical challenge, and years of uninterrupted combat training without the constraints that came with being Grand Regent. Viltrumites get stronger by almost dying. The body adapts, the ceiling rises, and every near-death experience makes the next fight harder to end. Thragg's exile gave him years of that, uninterrupted, with no political role requiring him to hold back. By the time he re-enters the main conflict, he's been through more genuine survival-level encounters since the deposition than most characters experience across their entire history. He fought Ragnar's, he fought Battle Beast. He maintained a combat tempo that the Grand Regent role would never have allowed because it required him to project control and authority rather than actually being tested. The exile, which the other characters treated as a win when they deposed him, was functionally a conditioning period. It made him better. The version that comes back for the final conflicts is harder, more experienced in genuine mortal combat, and freed from the strategic patience that made him hold back for so long. He's no longer managing a situation, he's just fighting. Thragg isn't invulnerable. Here's what actually works against him and why none of it is easy to use.
No
Nolan made us a list of all these awesome Viltrumite weaknesses and weapons.
The Scourge virus is the most significant one. It was engineered specifically from Viltrumite DNA to target the species, and it nearly wiped them out. It compromises the immune system and strips their strength and invulnerability.
The Scourge virus, but improved. If released, not a single Viltrumite will survive its wrath this time.
Thragg survived it originally, along with a handful of other Viltrumites who made it through, which suggests his biological resilience gives him a better than average chance against it compared to baseline members of his species, but it's not immunity. A thorough application of the Scourge virus is the closest thing in the series to a reliable method of defeating a Viltrumite, Thragg included. High-frequency sound waves are the other documented vulnerability. Viltrumite flight depends on a complex inner ear balance system, and precise high-frequency sound waves can disrupt that equilibrium severely enough to cause extreme pain, disable flight, and if it's intense enough, potentially kill.
Remember that giant lobster you tangled with in Atlantis? I had the lab boys recreate the sound it made. Turns out we can transmit it to your earpiece.
This is why the GDA developed sonic devices specifically for anti-Viltrumite use. Against Thragg specifically, this means someone with the right technology and enough courage has at least a theoretical approach to defeating him. It doesn't help that he's aware of this vulnerability and has been for thousands of years, which means he fights in a way that limits exposure to anyone who might use it. Sustained extreme heat is the third one, and the sun fight is where we see this clearly. Thragg's smart atoms, the biological mechanism behind Viltrumite durability, can be disrupted by prolonged exposure to extreme temperatures. The sun fight attacks them visibly in a way that combat normally doesn't. This doesn't mean fire hurts him in any conventional sense. It means something like a star's core, sustained over time, is the only thermal environment extreme enough to actually overcome the regeneration rate. That's a very specific set of conditions that's essentially impossible to engineer outside of pulling someone into a star. His weaknesses are real, but every single one of them requires either technology almost nobody has, conditions that are basically impossible to engineer, or getting close enough to use them against someone faster than light. Knowing what hurts Thragg is the easy part. Using that knowledge in a battle is a completely different problem. The show's universe still has some genuinely powerful characters worth positioning against Thragg though. Alan the Alien's second Zenith boost after the bomb changes the comparison meaningfully.
Turned off your life support machine. I knew without it, you would either die or recover stronger than before. But it has paid off.
The second boosted Alan flew into a star and pulled Mark out with no damage to himself, while Thragg took serious damage from the sun. That's a legitimate argument for second boost Alan sitting with or even beyond Thragg on the power scale. The matchup between exile hardened Thragg and second boost Alan is one of the most heavily contested debates in the fandom, and I don't think it has a clean answer. Alan's scaling from near-death experience is explicitly described as dramatic enough to make him comparable to the most powerful beings alive, and his immunity to the sun's environment is a direct comparison point to Thragg's vulnerability to the same thing in a fight. But that's one character with a specific boost at a very specific moment. Against everyone else, the picture is considerably clearer. In the comics, he dispatched Thetis, founder of the Coalition of Planets, one of the oldest and most experienced Viltrumites alive, without a sustained exchange. Thetis had survived for thousands of years, built an entire interstellar resistance movement, and had enough combat experience that he was the one credible military leader capable of organizing a war against Viltrum.
Why have I never heard of you?
You have heard of me, but our people call me by a different name.
The Betrayer.
Thragg decapitated him. He made Omni-Man feel like a lesser opponent every time they shared space. Nolan at full capability couldn't do much damage. This is the same Nolan who took on Invincible and nearly killed him, who is considered a serious physical threat by other Viltrumites who survived encounters that should have ended him. Against Thragg, he was at best a distraction. He put the post-Viltrumite war version of Mark in a coma without straining. The only path to beating Thragg in the comics involved Mark making a decision to sacrifice himself along with Thragg inside a star's core, which isn't a victory in the traditional sense. It's a tactical suicide that worked because Thragg had no answer for someone willing to die with him. Mark used the environment as the weapon because straight combat wasn't viable. That's not to say Mark is weak, it's a statement about Thragg being the kind of opponent where conventional victory isn't available. You just shouldn't plan to walk away from a fight with Thragg. What Season 4 showed you was Thragg with a reason to hold back. He let Mark and Nolan walk because he needed Viltrumite numbers. He left when things got complicated because an open war had costs he wasn't ready to pay yet. Every time he is posing a physical threat, he is also being incredibly calculating and careful. That restraint is what the Season 4 audience saw and interpreted as power. But it's actually the opposite of Thragg Unleashed. The most imposing version of him so far is still the version holding back. What the comics deliver in the later arcs after his exile is a Thragg who has stripped everything back. The Grand Regent title is gone, the Empire management is done, the long-term breeding program is a distant memory. What's left is his ability to operate without anything holding him back. That version is what the show is building toward, and the specific fights it produces are among the most extreme in the series. If you want to keep tabs on Invincible Season 4, subscribe to this channel.